Okay, so welcome back to Sikistan. Welcome back to another Strength and Conditioning Coaches React to. Today, as you've seen in the thumbnail, we're reacting to Wanderlei Silva's training montage. This is one of my personal favourites, and young Fladara was very, very into this training video. It's in 2009.
So 12 years ago.
Yeah, it was right when you'd be in your height of piss and vinegar. I was very into this. I'm not going to lie, I bought an elevation and training mask after this.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did.
Fitz has wanted to doing this for at least, I'd say, 6 months or more, and we just haven't got around to it. So it's Wanderlei Silva. A lot of people know who Wanderlei Silva is, who was involved in MMA, obviously. My favourite Wanderlei Silva incident is not an actual fight. It's when him and Chael are having that argument at that behind-the-scenes UFC thing, where they have their own team, and Wanderlei and Chael are having a little scuffle, and then Chael's like, I can't let you get close to me, and then he like pushes him off, and then he has a little double leg takedown, and then one of the little dirty scumbags from Wanderlei's team comes in and starts hitting Chael in the back of his head while he's like, everyone jumps in, and they pull off his shirt. So it's pretty scummy, but it's a great scene. I don't know if you've seen it after. Alex, I'll send you the link for it, or you should be able to find it. It's very entertaining. It's probably my favourite Chael moment. Actually, my other failed Chael moment is when he says, I'm going to go into your house with nods on and cut your wire, or cut the wires to the house, put on knots, something like that, and murder your whole family. He says the American way.
Because he was saying that the Brazilian guys were calling themselves gangsters.
Yes.
And he wanted to tell them who the real gangster was. Nothing like a bit of multiple homicide to prove how much of a gangster you are. Anyway, this is Wanderlei Silva training UFC 99, which to see double digits in the UFC number is pretty hilarious. This is
strength and conditioning training session at Wand Fight Team Las Vegas. So I assume that's his fight team, is it? Do you know anything?
I have no idea about the background of this.
Did you buy a DVD or something, or was he just watching
I
this?
bought the shorts that he's wearing in this.
No, you didn't.
Well.
You were heavily into this?
No, I was so into it. So anyway, we see Wanderlei. This is kind of like the initial piece of the video. He has a harness on for doing like sled pulls, you would assume. He is hitting a tire with a big heavy sledgehammer. And then something you're going to see as we kind of get a small bit into the video, there's a few non-standard strength and conditioning protocols. So the first thing is you see his nose being taped over.
Can we talk about the sledgehammer thing first?
We can, yeah.
So if you're using sledgehammer in training, you're going to be using it either for plyometric work, so maybe that might be a little bit misguided, or you're going to be using it for conditioning work. So if you're using it for conditioning work, you want as many strikes at a consistent stroke rate as possible. No innuendos, please. So just hitting it with a lighter hammer as fast as possible, trying to do some endurance training, build an aerobic capacity, some kind of cardiovascular activity with a light hammer. If you were doing it for plyometric training, you would still be using a really light hammer, but you would be doing it as fast as possible. So you'd be hitting the tire as fast as possible, but it would be the exact opposite number of repetitions that you'd be doing with the aerobic work for sledgehammer striking, which would be doing very fast rotational strikes, maybe 2 to 3 reps, resting for literally like 90 seconds, if not more, and then going again, maybe 5 minutes. So you're waiting until you're fully recovered, all of the fatigue is dissipated from the previous set, and then you're smashing it again for as fast as possible. So when we're doing plyometric work like that, we don't want to be swinging a really heavy slow hammer. So he's not really getting any aerobic work from this because it's really heavy and slow, so it's not really getting into those heart rate zones. And you're not getting any proper upper body plyometric work from the really heavy hammer, because like we've talked about a lot, if you're training slow, you're training muscles to move in a slow fashion, you're training your motor unit recruitment to be slow, you're training the specific fibers that would be used that are slower twitch fibers, you're training those when you're moving slow. So the speed of the movement dictates what muscle fibers are used, and we can see when he's slamming that sledgehammer really slow that he's just training slow, basically, like we've mentioned a lot.
Yeah, which is very unuseful for a striking sport like MMA.
I know you never give any of your athletes sledgehammer stuff, surely not.
Never. No.
I don't get it. I don't really.
I think as a conditioning piece, it's novel.
It's funny seeing people
novel,
who
like,
can't swing a sledgehammer usually.
Yeah. But yeah, I think in like a CrossFit gym setting where most people watching this video will have seen it, you'll see it in a setting where like it's not really, nobody's really putting power into the hammer, or they're either like they're so tired, like Owen was talking about, by the time they get to swinging the hammer, they're not really putting any gusto or pizzazz into the striking. I think it looks great. It looks like when you have videos or video cameras in the gym and you want to look like a tough guy, swinging a sledge is a pretty good thing to do.
I don't think it does, because what I see is people with really bad sledgehammer strokes hitting something. It's kind of wobbles away in their hand.
Or when they hit and it bounces off to the side.
Yeah, I that's what I always see from that. I never am like, damn, he's cool, you know.
Yeah.
If he was chopping actual wood, I'd be like, that's
much
pretty
more
cool.
legit and useful.
Yeah.
Anyway, next thing in the video is we see Wanderlei getting his nose taped over, right? So famously enough, Wanderlei has had his nose reconstructed, which has led to a very different shaped Wanderlei's face now. But in this, I don't know if it's in the video, we've the sound turned off, but definitely in the background of this video, he's talking about his nose gets broken or blocked almost immediately once he starts a fight. So this must be pre-reconstruction. And that's why he tapes over his nose when he's training, so he gets that emulation of mouth breathing. Garth, tell the people why breathing through your mouth only is a bad thing.
So in recent years, there's been a lot of research now. There's also been a lot of people who've picked up on the research and made it a little bit seem like a quack thing, and made it seem like a gimmicky thing, unfortunately.
Very snazzy.
Made it seem very snazzy. But a lot of the research has been pointing in the direction, and there's some good physiological reasons, which we'll get into in a different video, I think. But long story short, breathing through your nose is the most optimal fashion you should be doing. So default breathing should be through your nose, and for the vast majority of your conditioning work, up until about 90%, should be through your nose. They reckon some of the people who are kind of making headways into this talk about, for example, only mouth breathing for less than 60-second bouts throughout the full session of your aerobic work. So if you're doing like 30 minutes of aerobic work, it should be in the last like 30 seconds of maximum intensity where you bring in your mouth breathing, and even then it's not ideal. So nose breathing is the thing that you're always striving for. So there's better gas exchanges, there's even differences of how your vision focuses on things. So if you are nose breathing, you're keeping a different part of your CNS active, so you're not reducing your peripheral vision. So if you start mouth breathing, it's usually a sign of stress. So your body realizes that you are in some form of duress, and it focuses in your vision. Your peripheral vision is reduced, so your decision-making skills are also reduced alongside of that. So mouth breathing is the opposite of what you want, especially in a fight situations. You want to continue to be nasal breathing, continue to make good, solid decisions, and keep optimal gas exchanges going for your aerobic work.
The other interesting piece here is, see, he's taped over nose, obviously just going fully oral breathing, but now what we see is he's wearing a snorkel as he's doing it, and it looks like there's a restrictor on the top of the snorkel as well. This was the thing back then. This was like elevation training mass, restricted breathing, all of these things were it, you know. And remembering like the infomercials and then the stuff that came out around it, that they're getting these heightened blood values. We talk about heightened blood values on the channel a fair bit when we talk about conditioning and getting in better aerobic shape, and they were claiming this of like heightened red blood cell values, being able to better transport oxygen around your body, so then you get like EPO like effects from doing this kind of training. In fact, when we start restricting breathing, a lot of what we're doing is learning bad breathing patterns. So in the same way Garth was talking about there being a stress response to only oral breathing and not nasal breathing, we then get a stress response when we have restricted airways. In the same way as if Garth was to grab my neck now and start choking me, I wouldn't be the most chilled out person in the world. I'd probably get an elevated heart rate. I'd certainly get some form of physiological stress response, and then we get an overall drop in effectiveness of training. So someone is under stress, they're going to start short stroking their breath, so the diaphragm will stop dropping down as they're breathing in. They'll more than likely start taking in the upper kind of third of the lungs, they'll start processing most of the oxygen, whereas we want ideally those lungs to be filling as full as we possibly can, especially when we're under this kind of fatigue in a conditioning piece. We'd want that diaphragm to be dropping down. We want the intercostals and the rib cage in general to be as stationary as they could possibly be, and that will produce the most effective kind of athletic outcomes and training outcomes, rather than restricting the air intake, not getting a good training effect, and then not having a good kind of aerobic value after that either because you haven't trained correctly.
Just on that point as well, Fitz said, if it won't choke me, and I could, because as a white belt in jiu-jitsu,
Oh, you're a trained killer. Like.
trained killer,
The only thing that would go against you is
you're also a white
I
belt.
am also a trained killer.
Yeah. So the EPO thing is very interesting. So there is a legitimate physiological reason that happens. So in hypoxic or low oxygen environments, when your body is in that environment, it releases more EPO. So EPO is erythropoietin. It's a hormone in your blood. It's naturally derived. So I know sometimes a lot of people think EPO is a synthetic hormone, or it's some kind of small molecule pharmaceutical ingredient or something like that that isn't developed in a lab. But it's actually a hormone in your body, released. It just produces more red bloods, essentially, because when you have more red blood cells, you can carry more oxygen. And when you're in a hypoxic environment, so low oxygen environments like Fitz is saying, you produce more of this, more red blood cells, and carry more oxygen. The real thing with that, though, is it needs to be for long periods of time. So something like this isn't going to simulate that. You need to be living at high altitude where there's low oxygen levels, so your body produces EPO or erythropoietin, and then you get these high levels of oxygen. Then you go down below base camp, down to sea level. You do your training where you have this enhanced effect, and it definitely does provide some enhanced effect. You get better quality training. You make use of these extra red blood cells, and then you go on your merry way and get your white belt in jiu-jitsu.
And this is the reason why you'll see most kind of athletic teams and stuff who are using altitude training will live at altitude, or if they've access to an altitude house, they'll live at altitude and then train at sea level, or else they'll live at altitude and train at altitude. But ideally you do have that live high, train low kind of interplay going on, and it's much better.
I don't know what he was doing with the medicine ball there, to be honest.
The medicine ball, yeah, this is like, I don't think we should dwell on this too much, because in every single reaction video we do, we talk about people doing power training during their conditioning and it being useless, flipping a tire, running on a treadmill.
Yeah.
Like,
Whatever.
It's conditioning work.
So we talked about like not mixing on the Stephen Wonder by Thompson. We talked about not mixing your plyometric stuff and not mixing your strength training. But it's okay to mix up your conditioning stuff. There's nothing really particularly egregious about that. So if you mix up your running and you mix up your tire flipping, not a huge issue. You can even kind of mix up some of your conditioning with your muscular endurance work, which we kind of see here.
Everything up, like
the hammer press,
clean and press, is all grand. That's perfect. Like,
it's okay, not perfect, but
no,
it's okay.
But it's like it's not a heavy weight. He's
not a weightlifter. It doesn't matter.
No. But I don't like the hammer press.
No.
That is a power exercise. Like,
it's either power or strength, and you're getting neither from doing this.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure what we're talking about, go check out the Stephen Wonder by one where we talked about the 7 deadly sins of MMA strength training. So here we've got him doing some weighted sled sprints. I don't really know why an MMA fighter would really do those. It wouldn't be anything particularly negative, but
I think it's more fatigue inducing again. You know, it's like it's hard to do. You can load it up fairly heavily, and people tend to do it at the end of sessions because fighters can just lean into a harness and work hard. They feel like they're getting an extra kind of top off. They might use it as a finisher pretty commonly. Most of the time we see sleds being used effectively. If they're being used in a sprinting context, it's around 5% of body weight or less. Sometimes in very heavy resistance stuff, when they're really working on an acceleration phase, they might use 10% of body weight. But the weighted sleds overall, the resistance they're using is very low, you know. So obviously we talked about training slow, producing slower results. When you sprint with a sled, you want the sled to be quite light, and it's just working on the power, the acceleration phase, the initial 10 to 15 to 20% of your race or run or whatever distance you're doing. In this case, where the sled is loaded up, right, so that there's a few plates on the sled and he's kind of sprinting and running and barely moving the sled, in that case you're much better off doing that as a sled walk. So really leaning into it. It's a very effective training tool in terms of conditioning because there's no eccentric phase, it's just all concentric, so you don't fatigue the muscle or break the muscle down too much. You don't use the tendons hugely in a stretch shortening cycle. There's none of that kind of elastic reflex of that. So it's really good in that case to walk with a sled that's fairly heavily loaded. But that's not what we're seeing here.
So we touched on muscular endurance training, and the funny thing about muscular endurance training is it's actually never really done in the gym productively. Like, so there's no real muscular endurance training you could do in the gym that would really match the kind of capacity or work capacity you'd need for fight training, for example. So where would you get that? So it'd be very specific, intense conditioning work. So like stuff like Running is fine. It's not the best, but it's okay. Ideally, stuff like assault bike sprints, so sprinting intervals on a bike, for example, or at high intensity for as long as you can. You get a lot of muscular endurance training just from doing your sport specific stuff in terms of like fighting. So if you have a high base of conditioning, most of that is coming from aerobic capacity. So that muscular endurance is coming from your aerobic capacity to do stuff. So if you build that separately, so you do that in conditioning sessions, you don't really need to do any muscular conditioning training with weighted objects, for example, with the chains, with the barbell. It doesn't really transfer over that well. It helps a little bit, maybe, might be a little bit hypertrophic effect, but it's not really that productive. You're better off getting a good aerobic base through like steady state work mixed with some high intensity interval work, and then doing as much of your sport specific stuff as you can possibly do, rather than trying to do like sets of 20. So we see rowers doing stuff like sets of 20 in the back squat and stuff. Those 20 reps doesn't match the hundreds of reps you will do in your sport, so it's just kind of a waste of time. You're not getting any productive strength training, you're not getting any productive hypertrophy work, really. You're just making yourself fatigued. You're kind of wasting your time in the gym when you could be doing better and more productive stuff. And you kind of see that again in MMA a lot as well, where you just see muscular endurance and muscular strength isn't really done in a productive way.
If you would like to see what productive like strength and power training for MMA, for any combat sport, or just if you're generally looking to get into a bit of strength and power training, we have a 10-week strength and power program specifically written for combat athletes. All you need to know is a few 1RMs for your power clean, your deadlift, your front squat, your back squat, and your presses, and you're good to go. People have had phenomenal results with it. There's a lot of fighters using it right now. And yeah, you'll get access to some coaching. You'll get to ask myself and Owen questions twice a week. You'll get to send in some videos via the members group. If that's something you're interested in, click the link below in the bio and you'll find the program there.
Can I just offer some advice in regards to doing the program? Because a lot of times you'll have people saying, oh, so I do jiu-jitsu twice a week and I'm an office athlete or desk bound. How would I fit the 4 days in? So there's two options you can do. One is you can take a proper step back from your mixed martial arts training, your jiu-jitsu, your combat sports, whatever it is you're doing, and do that once a week, and then fit in the program 4 times a week, and just take a little step back for your long-term progress as an athlete in your chosen combat sport. So this will be much better. It's just literally 10 weeks to get a head start. Think of it as a head start in your strength training. So you get 10 weeks where you're getting a head start in your strength and power training. Like we talk about fits from our recent experiences with jiu-jitsu or whatever. Like we have enough strength training done where we could never ever strength train again for literally the next 10 years and still have enough strength to fight basically any non-enhanced athlete in grappling, I would think, to match them for strength training, because literally have 15 years each or 15 more years of a lot of strength training and reach very high levels of that. So you don't need to go massively crazy with your strength levels for combat sports, but you do need to get a good head start on them, and you need to give yourself a chance to get a little bit stronger. So I'd recommend doing the combat sports program just literally 10 weeks. Think of this as like an off season. Treat yourself like an athlete. Just take like 10 weeks back a little bit from your whatever it is you're doing. Just do one session a week, even maybe one every 2 weeks if you can afford it, if that's what you want to do, and then finish the program, and then you'll learn how to maintain your strength. Or the other option is you could literally do the program over the course of 20 weeks. So we have a lot of people do programs like this when they're not kind of professional or semi-pro or whatever, or student athletes, something like that. You can literally do like 1 week over the course of 2 weeks, so 2 days each week, if that's something you guys want to do. So it is worth your while, and you'll get a good training effect over that course of time.
Yeah,
but you got to do that now.
I love that video.